time for a break. Grab a coffee, get comfy, and catch up with old friends. Join us for an easy chat on all the biggest news stories of the day on ICRT Breakdown, a bilingual 2030 policy program brought to you in cooperation with the National Development Council.
Hey, welcome everybody. You're listening to ICRT's Breakdown. Come and join us as we talk about some of the topics going on in the news today, some interesting topics, mixing in some English and some Chinese together to give you the vocabulary to talk about the world around you in English, of course. And I'm one of your hosts today, Tim Berge, and joining me as always is my fine co-host.
I am Paz Bueno.
Hey, Paz, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
And I think we have two stars joining us today,
yes,
too.
Yes, we do. Joining us today are Catherine and Howard, the host of Morning Taiwan Glocal News. Very interesting word, that. As the name implies, it's an informative morning show hosted on the social audio app Clubhouse. They also have a podcast, and the hosts usually discuss and share both local and global news with their listeners. So, hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, Tim and Paz.
How you guys doing?
We're
doing great.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we start the conversation by getting to know you guys a little bit better. So my first question is, Clubhouse?
Great question.
You know, when Clubhouse first came out, everyone was really excited about it. And then after a few months, it's like, what's Clubhouse? And so I'm not trying to diss you or anything like that. I'm just kind of curious, why are you doing this on Clubhouse and not doing it on another medium?
Well, first of all, it's a live podcast show, a live news show.
Right.
So Clubhouse allowed us to connect one another without being able to, have to be at the same room, same time. We just connect with one another and our listeners all together. Every morning, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. live. So it's nonstop for 2 years. So it's a very convenient platform for us.
Yeah, and also for the record, Clubhouse is now officially available for everyone. Unlike when it was launched 2 years ago.
Right, you had to wait for the invitation.
Right, but now it's available. So it's a convenient tool.
And I think also people can talk to you in real time too.
Yes.
So that is an advantage over just doing other types of forms of podcasting and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like live calling in. We can take call-ins from our listeners.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I know our DJs always love doing that too, although sometimes you get some surprises. But that makes the game a little bit more fun, doesn't it?
It's very organic because people can leave their live comments according to the content of our show. Even they disagree, they can show or type their comment or their thoughts into our chat rooms, and we can read their comments.
I noticed that your listeners are all actually pretty active, interacting on the chat rooms as well. So that's pretty cool. I've listened to their Clubhouse.
And have you been pounding away on the
No, I'm just I'm just a lurker. I'm just lurking there listening to how I can improve my own podcast shows.
And the other thing I'm kind of curious about is, how do you choose the subjects you want to be talking about, and where do you get the information? Because, sometimes I'm the same problem. Like, I want to talk about stuff, then I realize, oh no, I have to hunt for the information. Forget it. I'm not going to do it. So how do you guys handle that?
So every morning we...
Howard kind of has a blank look on his face. I'm a little concerned right now.
So luckily we have a great producer working with us every day.
Ooh.
So I don't know what time she go to bed.
Or she doesn't go to bed.
Maybe.
I don't know. So she basically scout all the information online, maybe from the news channel she's subscribed to, and gather a sort of a news clip for us to choose from. That becomes our topics every day.
That's our newsroom. So it's a line group.
Okay, so the two of you are not even sitting, talking face to face. You're doing this all online.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, it makes for a convenient conversation. I mean, because sometimes it's nice to be able to, I can talk to Paz face to face and we kind of share opinions. How does that work out, doing everything over line?
I think interesting, when the show first started, it's during COVID time. The COVID situation prohibit people gather together in the same room, same time. So we started from that. And we do so many conversations just online chatting. And luckily, we don't have any boo-boos or glitches.
You love that word now, don't you? Boo-boos, yes, yes.
我们是在疫情的时候开始这个新的节目的。那个时候，其实我们就没有办法很长的面对面坐下来讨论节目的内容。我们有的时候就是一通电话。那个时候的习惯就延续到现在。
而且我们取这个全球串联早安新闻 That's a Chinese title of our show, Morning Taiwan Glocal News. A lot of people ask us that, actually. 很多人就会问说，那个 Glocal 这个字为什么不是用 global， 还说你们是不是拼错了？好，可是我们就选择说要 global 也要 local， 所以就是要全球也要在地，所以我们就觉得说很适合用网络的方式来做，然后用 live 也很好。
So with your listeners, are they more interested in the local news or the international news?
Definitely.
International.
International.
Oh, really?
Mainly, yeah.
Because that's one common criticism in Taiwan, that the media is not international enough. So you guys are doing your bit to make the news more international.
应该是让更多的国际的新闻出现。But funny thing is that 现在很多的事情都 intertwined together. You cannot definitely, well, this is international news event, this is local Taiwanese news event. You cannot separate anymore.
Yeah.
Especially as recently, I think Taiwan is getting more and more on the international stage. Like more and more countries are paying attention to what's going on here. 所以台湾现在也已经是国际新闻的一个焦点了。
So most certainly is, for good or bad, that's right. But I think we need to get back to the topic at hand for today, which I think Paz may know what that is.
The reason why we've invited you here is so that we can talk about the G7 summit. This year's G7 summit, it's being held from May 19th to 21st in Hiroshima, Japan. So as you guys are all familiar with all these international matters, these global events, we want you to help us understand exactly the importance of the G7 and what we can expect from this year's summit, the G7 summit.
You're right. So the G7 summit, it's France, United States, UK, Germany, Japan, Italy, and Canada. And as you just said, they're meeting in Hiroshima, Japan. I think also the EU joins in too as they say, a non-enumerated member. So that means they're a member, but they're not mentioned. Okay, you explain that to me. And it's kind of interesting. The G7 didn't start out as the G7. I think it started out like the G4, actually. Then it was the G6. But it kind of grew partially out of the oil crisis of 1973, which I'm sure all of you people here are too young to remember that. But actually, I was around back then. And, you know, oil prices were going through the roof due to unrest in the Middle East. And so I think, you know, the international main economies of the world, they felt a need to kind of come together and start creating some policies to meet that situation. So how has it kind of evolved to today?
As you mentioned, like it began kind of like as a group of these economic powers, you know, they're gathering together in order to solve these different global crises. They're addressing these.
Or at least to exchange ideas.
Right, exactly. And then after that, year after year, is that they would continue gathering and they would continue addressing all of these concerns. Yeah, and exchanging ideas. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and also I think Taiwan is now the focus here, like one of the focus here for G7, and that makes it more and ever more relevant for us, especially during the foreign ministers meeting, because under G7 there's the many meetings and also side conferences outside of the ministerial meetings and all that. And recently they just made an announcement saying that the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait will be the interests of all the 7 countries or 7 economies participating in the G7.
Yeah.
Right. So although Taiwan is not part of G7, the interest or at least the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait is definitely a key focus here.
Yeah. Just like Tim mentioned, that Taiwan right now, for good or for bad, has become the center of the tension of the globe. And right now, I think that the G7 as a group is trying to have a united response toward these global threats, and especially after the Russians' aggression against Ukraine. And also the location they're choosing this year is also very relevant, important this year. We can talk a little bit about that. 因为现在台湾尤其是在亚太地区的重要性其实越来越多了。在乌俄战争之后，台湾在面对到的威胁，国际可不可以整个联合起来有一个具体的行动？我觉得这些包括了疫情之后的挑战，都是今年为什么 G7 再次组织集会起来是非常重要的原因。
All right, before we continue, let's backtrack a little bit and explain what is the G7. So Tim has already mentioned, it's an annual event where leaders from France, the US, the UK, Germany, Japan, Italy, and Canada discuss policy coordination on various issues. 所以它是一个联合一些经济最大的一些国家的领导人。
7大工业国，所以他们是世界上工业很强，经济也很强。像我们刚刚讲到法国、美国、英国、德国、日本、意大利、加拿大。那刚刚 Tim 有提到一个很特别的就是欧盟
Yes
EU 它不是一个正式的 member， 因为我们刚刚提到法国跟德国英国比较特别啦法国跟德国都已经在欧盟里面了嘛。
对
啊，那为什么还要再让欧盟参与？我 我觉得就跟乌俄战争有很大的关系吧。
I think as opposed to NATO， 它是一个北大西洋公约组织是一个非常强调成员一定得在所有的规范里头的。但是G7 或是这个以后不知道会 expand to G how many， 它有一个 inclusiveness， 就是希望可以容纳更多的多元性的声音进来。所以就算他们不是在约定成章法的这个规范里头是成员，但是今年就特别被邀请进来的 participants 也很多。
Yes. So, like, invited countries also include Australia, Brazil, Comoros, a country that...
I had to check Wiki for that one yesterday.
Me too. They're the current African Union chair, then the Cook Islands, who are the current Pacific Islands Forum chair, India, Indonesia, South Korea, and Vietnam will also be participating in, as Howard mentioned, some of the ministerial meetings, some of the closed-door meetings between... Yes, exactly, between officials and things like that.
And it's also interesting that the core of the G7, not only are they industrial nations, but the nations all share some common values, you could say. They're all democratic nations. They're all trying to be more inclusive in their voices and what they do. So I think, it's more than just economy, which is playing an important factor here. But you can see with some of the other people who are joining on the sidelines, they're obviously very strong economic powers, especially here in Asia, South Korea, Vietnam. Those are all very strong economic voices, too.
Moving on to the location of this year's G7. So, 它今年是在哪里举办? This year's meeting is taking place in Hiroshima, which is more widely known for being the first military target of a nuclear weapon in human history. There is a huge significance in that.
It's so interesting because on May 8th, Russia just announced they want to extract people around a nuclear plant. And we were so worried when we heard about this news. We're so worried there are going to be an intensive military combat around that nuclear plant area. So I think that raised awareness on this topic.
Yes. And that was nuclear plant in Ukraine.
Yeah. 其实在5月8号的时候呢，刚好俄罗斯就颁布了一个命令，他希望撤离在乌克兰境内现在是由俄罗斯它运营的一个核电厂附近的居民，那有1000位以上的居民受到了影响，其中600多名是孩童，就收到命令之后他们就要离开这个核电厂了。当然大家都是很担心说是不是在周围的地区会有很激烈的武装的冲突。
Yeah, so nuclear is definitely in the center of attention here. Yeah, when people are talking about it, whether it being nuclear weapon or nuclear power plants, people are quite sensitive about that. Here in Taiwan, also in the north, right, there are nuclear power plants. That's why, we care about this so much. Yeah, and also recently I just noticed that in the news, something happened in New Taipei City. Yeah, like some legislators, they questioned the New Taipei City mayor, which 7 are the G7 countries? That's actually a challenging question. And he couldn't answer. Right. So, people are like, oh, you don't know anything about G7. He can't. Oh. Yeah, but then he realized that, hey, because he mentioned South Korea, but definitely South Korea, as we just talked about,
is
not an official member. But it's, joining some side meetings as well. People
it's a tough question to be asked without any preparation.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, we know which countries are in the G7 because we prepared
Because you wrote it down on this piece of paper.
Yes, exactly. Okay. We have a script. Still is really interesting that someone who could potentially be a presidential candidate does not have a base
kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
We should invite him to listen to your show and our podcast.
Yes,
well, we'll get him informed real
episode,
quickly. That's right.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, it gets a little confusing because, like we said, okay, it's the G7. There's the core members. But then there's also the EU, which is an observer, a non-enumerated member, whatever that means. And then you have all these other countries who are joining too. So it does get a little confusing. Who exactly is the member and who's not the member? So I could see how someone may get a little confused about that. So
right.
I guess I won't
judge him.
I won't judge him too harshly at this moment. Yes.
It's probably thinking about other things, not...
I hope so. But I think it's also interesting that you brought up the fact that Hiroshima, which was the first target of the A-bomb, and so there's been calls this year with it happening in Hiroshima and the U.S. President Joe Biden going there, that the U.S. reaffirm its commitment to disarmament, getting rid of nuclear weapons, and also that the U.S. won't be using a nuclear weapon first in any conflict. So I think, we can't escape nuclear weapons and what, the history of Hiroshima and the last, century.
And I've seen multiple times the nuclear free world, this phrase and this key vocabulary have been shown so many times on different news articles and news events. That is the goal G7 is working toward to achieve. So I think this year, this location means a lot.
今年的 G7 它是举办在广岛，那它主要的象征者就是因为它是在历史当中第一个被核武器
轰炸的地方。
Yes, 对。那所以他今年举办在 Hiroshima， 也就是 as Tim mentioned， 就是 they want to kind of symbolize or cement their commitment to, let's all not
Non-proliferation.
Exactly. Let's avoid using nuclear weapons. Let's not use it as either a threat or, as a result of disagreements between countries.
这几年真的是讨论越来越多，就在讲这种核子武器，或者是防止核扩散。
对。
就是我们刚才谈的这个题目
non-proliferation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the topics for this year's meeting? So we already mentioned the nuclear disarmament is one big topic. We've also mentioned that, this year the Indo-Pacific, especially peace in the Taiwan Strait, is going to be another focal point.
And I think Catherine just mentioned too Ukraine.
Yes.
Ukraine's going to be an important talking point.
How to make it stop. How to stop all these.
That's not going to be very easy. But also like climate and energy, food policy, health, economic development, those are all issues which will be discussed. And I think these are maybe all issues which Taiwan can have interest in too.
Yeah, and plus these are post-pandemic era. And I think Taiwan has great stories and methodologies how to come back with this COVID whole situation, right? And also how to handle this post-COVID situation and how to still have the basic alert and still have this awareness, but also let, the border open and make economy back again. So I think on this matter, Taiwan has a lot to share too. 还有就是现在的情况，因为我们已经走出了疫情的威胁最严重的时候嘛，那我认为说在整个面对控制疫情的过程当中，台湾有很多的很好的经验，我觉得也是很值得跟国际社会一起交流分享。
Will Taiwan have anyone on the sidelines at G7, do you know?
I think at least observation, 观察团
Okay.
有可能
probably
在
not
现场
official delegation.
Yeah, and like not official governmental delegations, but definitely groups from Taiwanese organizations will be going there.
But I can share a little bit of an insider
Ooh,
information.
we love inside information.
Come
on.
I was serving in the foreign ministry for my substitute military service. Yeah, and there's a department that's called International Organizations Department.
Yes.
And they are actually involved in talks with many international organizations, including the United Nations. Although officially, people know that Taiwan is not a member.
Right.
We probably, as we mentioned, don't have an official delegation to G7, yet on the sidelines, I'm sure there are contacts and connections.
We're not officially invited, but we've got ears.
Yes.
And I hope we have a mouth too.
Yes.
So we share our opinion, which is important.
Yeah. So Taiwan has really been, I think, like a great role model. Taiwan's economy during the coronavirus pandemic, and then how they handled the entire situation, and then how they're handling, going back as the world is opening up again. Taiwan has really. I've been very proud of, being here in Taiwan during these past 3 years.
I'm just kind of curious too, though, like with Catherine and Howard, since your listeners can respond to you in real time, what has their response been regarding the G7? Is this something which you think is important to Taiwanese, or is it something that it's just happening out there and, it's all these big countries, but it really doesn't involve Taiwan?
Well, I think it's fair to say that our listeners care.
Being the above average listeners that they are.
I wouldn't say that, though.
You already said they're interested in international news more, which I think is very good.
I think it has been a shift.
Good.
That the people who care about international news no longer belongs to all highly educated people or people from overseas coming back to Taiwan. I think it's more than that the group has broadened itself.
Cool.
And people want to know our relevance, our presence. It means Taiwan's presence. How can Taiwan speak and, just like you said, has ears and mouth to talk for ourselves? I think that's their focus in terms of, whether WHO, UN, or G7 meetings like these times.
Yeah, people want to have our voice heard internationally. I think that's really important because now with the aggression of China being ever more obvious, more and more people are aware that we need to have our voice heard. And for our voice to be heard, we need to be part of the international organizations. I think they now start to have this idea that we should care more about what's going on around in the world and how people look at us and how we present ourselves, right? So to start to do that, I think international news is a very important step.
And I think as more countries and more people understand Taiwan's position and Taiwan's importance, they are more willing to speak up for Taiwan and to support Taiwan.
Yeah, it's two-way streets. And also I would like to add on, even when some foreign delegation, war minister, they specifically mention Taiwan, I think it's the person who mentioned about the Taiwan situation will gain so much more popularity here in Taiwan. That our people want to know more about him or her and want to root for this kind of action. Yeah.
So you're talking about Nancy Pelosi there, is that it?
Name one.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So in conclusion, in a nutshell, G7, the group of seven, is a collective in which world leaders from multiple countries, as well as some invited countries. So it's not just the G7 members, but also some other countries who can also contribute to this international forum. They meet together and discuss global issues ranging from conflicts, 一些战争 or economic development, 他们的经济, to things like global warming and food security that affects everybody. This year's forum is being held in Hiroshima, Japan, with major discussions surrounding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, boosting supply chains, and strengthening efforts to meet energy and sustainable development goals.
That's an amazing summation.
Yes.
I like it.
All right. Any final thoughts about the G7? Is there anything you guys are waiting for, or any specific topics that you feel a little bit more interested in knowing about?
I think you should ask Howard what other inside information he has, which he's going to share with the audience.
Any insider news from your previous...
Pick up the phone and talk to your friends in the government,
Well, I can only share that the government has been really busy in terms of
that means a lot.
national defense.
Very busy.
Yeah, in terms of national defense, it's quite serious. But, I still think we should cherish our everyday life because we can still enjoy life as it is now.
Yeah.
And we have this freedom and democracy.
Yeah.
Right. So to be fair, I think, it's like we should say thank you to those people who are
fighting
working
for
hard.
our freedom every day.
But at the same time, everybody is a part of it, right? So we're just doing our part, and we care about the news. We care a little bit more, like about international news. I think then we're doing great. We're doing our part. Yeah, because what's most important is still, for everybody to have peace, to have a good life. That's what matters most.
I think in order to be on the international stage, we first need to familiarize ourselves with the international stage to know exactly where we stand.
Personally, I want to see if there are any concrete behavior agreement towards climate change and energy safe, energy cycle, recycling, and how to use that more efficiently. Because in the past, we've seen so many empty slogans. And this year, I think the threat is more imminent right now. So personally, I would love to see they have a more smart solution toward this big threat.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are very hopeful.
It's good to have hope. It's good to have hope.
We all need hope. Should we get to the fun part of the show? At least the fun part, in my opinion.
Okay.
Which is our cat's meow or our pet peeve. So these are just anything in English, maybe a new phrase you've heard that you really like or really dislike, or maybe it's an old phrase that you've been nurturing for a long time and you just want to share with us. So, I don't know, should I go first?
As always.
Well, not always, but I thought of something real quick, and I don't know quite how to say this, but one thing which really bugs me more and more, which is the different abbreviations that people use on the internet. Half the time I'm having to guess, okay, what does this mean? Or I'm having to Google search it. And also sometimes after a while, expressions seem to change their meaning too. Okay, for example, TLDR.
Too long didn't read.
Too long don't read.
Too long don't read.
Yes. And at first I just thought that was a message telling you, don't bother reading this, it's not worth reading. But now it's kind of becoming to mean like, here's the Reader's Digest version. It's the condensed, shortened version of the story. That's the TLDR.
Yeah, like the summary.
Exactly, the summary. But, these things are changing so much. Or, IDK, I don't know. It took me the longest while to figure out, what does IDK mean? And it's rather simple, but I'm
Do you know IDEK?
ID.
I don't
even know.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
And it's going to kill you to type that out. That's what I don't understand.
even know. Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, okay, it takes you one more second to type it out. So why do you need to abbreviate it?
I mean, it's 4 letters as opposed to
But seriously, do you
That's a lot of math. I'm not going to do the math, but it's 4 letters as opposed to multiple.
But is it really just a point that you're saving time, or you just think it's more cool, or because everyone understands it, so why not?
I think it's just convenient.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you're using iPhone, they have this auto-correction thing.
Yes, right.
And
Let me change it completely.
to a totally different thing. And you have to, backspace and then type it again. And
Okay.
TTYL.
I'm glad Catherine understands what I'm trying to say. Okay. Howard and Paz, you guys are too young. You don't understand. I'm going to cry in the corner.
We're always low on time, so we want to save as much as
Okay.
as possible. Yes, exactly.
So that's my pet peeve for today.
All right.
So, Paz.
Today's, I suppose it's a cat's meow. It's something that I like and something that I often engage in, especially on the weekends. Hermit mode. I go into hermit mode on the weekends.
What's that mean?
Hermit mode means I'm going to cut off all communications with the outside world. I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm just going to be at home watching TV, playing video games, sleeping, having a nap with my cat, tending to my little plants at home. I'm inside my little hermit cave, and
She's the wise hermit up in the mountains, living her little life all alone. Okay,
yes, engaging in hermit mode.
Okay.
Oh,
I like
disconnected
that phrase. Yes.
from these social media.
Right.
Kind of like the digital
gadgets.
detox.
A little bit like a digital detox. And I actually think recently more and more I've been doing more and more digital detox. Like I've been reducing the hours in which I use my phone.
Yeah, it does sound like a hermit.
Yes.
Well, we can help you out in that regard, Paz. So in the future, when you get to the office, we'll confiscate your phone and return it to you when you leave. How about that?
But I need to stay
drives me crazy.
informed while I'm here at work, Tim.
Okay.
For work.
Okay.
For work, yeah.
For
I
work.
need to stay informed.
Okay,
But
Howard,
at home,
I think she needs
to.
like a heavy dose of detox. So, anyways, so how about Howard and Catherine? What do you guys have?
Well, I will share a cat's meow.
Okay.
It's called gaslighting.
Ooh,
Yeah, I
wait.
think it's a relatively new word.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Serious word.
Yes.
Yeah, gaslighting is like a way to identify that some people are doing something terrible to us. Like if you are thinking that, oh, maybe I do something wrong, and then people will say, yes, you did it wrong, and you will feel bad. So it's like using the gaslight to confuse people, to make them think it's all their own fault. Yeah, so I want to bring people's attention to maybe mental health. Yeah, because some victims of gaslighting didn't know about this idea. They would think, oh, it's all their fault. Yeah, but when people know about this, I would say, trick of gaslighting, then people can protect themselves mentally.
Right. When you know about it, you're able to identify it when it's actually happening to you. Yeah, so
it's
gaslighting.
so important mental health lesson.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a cat's meow.
Cat's meow.
Yes, okay.
And mine is a word that I've been very obsessed with. I love the term oxymoron. It's just so funny when you use oxymoron. That means you put two complete opposite words together and make a new meaning. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it actually emphasizes a point.
Like a small giant.
Yeah.
or military intelligence. That's the old example.
Wow.
Except for you, Howard, okay? Everybody else.
For example, original copy that we use that a lot, right?
Yeah.
When we eat food, we have this jumbo shrimp.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and only option. I'm seriously funny. Something like that. You put two completely different words together and then emphasize another point.
Correct.
I think it's so smart, so funny sometimes.
That's a great word to bring.
Oxymoron.
Yeah,
And it
oxymoron.
sounds funny too, oxymoron,
Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds like mad or something.
Anytime I hear the word oxymoron, I don't know if you guys have seen the infomercials with that guy who's like, OxyClean, cleans everything. That's the first thing I think of whenever I think of it. Anyways.
Amazing TV that you're seeing ads like that.
It's just American ads.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Passive aggressive. Sometimes we say that a lot, right? Passive aggressive. Also
Yes.
one example.
Cool. Well, I like that example.
Yes. All right.
Well, that was it. So let's thank our two wonderful guests we had today, Catherine and Howard.
Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful insights.
And you have a show called
Morning Taiwan Glocal News.
全球串聯早安新聞.
And it's an hour discussion on local and international news.
All together. Yeah.
All in Mandarin?
In Mandarin, Monday to Friday, 星期一到星期五早上8点钟的时间 live on Clubhouse. And then after that, if you're listening to podcast platforms, you can also download and listen to our show on podcast.
Yeah, we do have some listeners who are learning Chinese using our show.
Well, you know, that I believe you, though, because like when I first came to Taiwan, I would listen to the radio a lot in Chinese.
Really?
It's a good way to kind of practice your language. And you hear people using language in a much more natural way. You know, because, you know, English and Chinese is all the same thing. Usually when you're talking, you're using simple vocabulary.
Yeah.
You're not using really big, you know, dictionary, long, impressive words.
Right.
Yeah. We use those words at school to impress our teacher. But when you're talking to your friends, you're not talking that way. So I could imagine listening to a show like that, and maybe like a foreign friend, they already know the international news. They read it in English.
Yep.
They listen to you guys, they can learn how to say it in Chinese. The same as listening to our show. You can learn how to say all this stuff in English.
Yes.
Yeah.
Two-way streets.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so that was another great episode of the ICRT Breakdown, a bilingual podcast brought to you by the great people at the NDC, the 国发会, the National Development Council, wanting to make Taiwan a little bit more English-friendly. So again, thank you to Catherine and Howard, and of course, my co-host, Paz.
You're welcome.
See you guys next time.
See ya.
Breaking the ice, breaking the mold, breaking down the news. You've been listening to ICRT Breakdown, a bilingual 2030 policy program brought to you in association with the National Development Council.